My dad mocked every achievement I ever had with slow claps and laughter. I used his exact mockery to shame him. Every single time I accomplished something, my dad would do this fake slow clap and laugh like I'd told the funniest joke in the world. When I made honor roll in 6th grade, he looked at the certificate and said, "Wow, they must be giving those to everyone now." When I got into varsity soccer as a freshman, he laughed and asked if they needed someone to carry water bottles. When I got accepted to college with a partial scholarship, he actually doubled over laughing and said the school must be desperate for tuition money. He'd tell his poker buddies about my achievements like they were comedy sketches, always ending with how standards had really dropped these days. Meanwhile, when Dad got Employee of the Month at his accounting firm, he framed the certificate and made us celebrate at a steakhouse. When he won $50 on a scratch-off, he called everyone he knew. When his boss complimented his spreadsheet organization, he talked about it for 3 weeks straight. But my full ride to graduate school? He laughed so hard he cried and said universities were basically giving away degrees now. My mom would tell me to ignore him, that he was proud in his own way. But I'd watch him at my graduation ceremonies, and while other parents cried with joy, he'd be smirking and shaking his head like the whole thing was ridiculous. When I got my first job at a tech company, he asked if they knew I couldn't even fix the Wi-Fi router at home. When I got promoted within 6 months, he said they probably just needed to fill diversity quotas. The worst part was he'd do this in front of other people. At family gatherings, he'd bring up my accomplishments just to mock them. He'd say things like, "My niece thinks she's special because she got some participation trophy they call a degree now." Or he'd tell his brothers that I got promoted, but it was probably just because my boss felt sorry for me. His brothers would look uncomfortable, but Dad would keep going, explaining how everything was easier now, and accomplishments didn't mean what they used to. When I bought my first house at 26, he walked through it laughing at everything. The kitchen was too small, the yard was pathetic, the neighborhood was pretentious. He told me I'd probably lose it in a year when reality hit about what mortgages actually cost. He took pictures, but only to show his friends what kids considered success these days. When I started dating someone serious, he laughed at how I described her and said she was probably just after my tech money. When we got engaged, he told me marriage was for people who couldn't handle being alone. At the wedding, during his speech, he made jokes about how long he gave us and how at least the divorce would teach me about real life. His co-workers who attended looked horrified, but he thought he was hilarious. That's when I found out something interesting. Dad's company was hiring for a new position that would be his boss's boss. They wanted someone with tech experience to modernize their systems. The hiring committee included 3 external consultants who would interview all candidates in panel format. I knew because my company had partnered with them on the search. I made sure to mention to the recruiters that my dad would be perfect for presenting to the panel about why he deserved a promotion, even though he hadn't applied. They thought it was a great idea to see current employees present their value. Dad was thrilled when he got invited to present, not knowing I'd arranged it. He spent weeks preparing his presentation about his 20 years of dedication and experience. The day came, and Dad walked into the conference room full of confidence. The panel started with basic questions about his achievements. Dad started listing them, and that's when I walked in as the 4th panel member, the tech consultant they'd brought in to evaluate digital readiness. Dad's face went white, but he had to continue. He talked about his Employee of the Month award, and I did his signature slow clap and laughed. The other panel members looked confused. He mentioned streamlining a process, and I laughed harder, asking if that meant he finally learned to use shortcuts in Excel. Dad tried to continue, but I kept interrupting with his favorite phrases. When he talked about mentoring junior employees, I asked if that meant taking credit for their work. When he mentioned his reliability, I laughed and said showing up was basically participation trophy stuff now. The panel members were getting uncomfortable, but I explained this was just the communication style I'd learned from him, that accomplishments should be met with skepticism and mockery to keep people humble. Dad tried to defend his achievements, but I laughed at each one, saying standards must have really dropped if that counted as success. I asked the panel if they noticed how everything was easier in his generation, and accomplishments didn't mean what they do now. Dad ended up stumbling through the rest of his presentation, while I smirked and shook my head at everything he said. The panel thanked him for coming, but their faces said everything. Full story on channel, link below.